Emergency meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Park District of the City of Fargo at 5 o'clock Monday, March 23rd. Approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for the agenda?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Motion's moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all passed. Item number 3, the one item on the agenda. Board to consider for approval a motion to allow Executive Director to use his discretion in regards to personal absences related to COVID-19 event. The motion will expire at the next regularly scheduled board meeting unless reauthorized at that time. This conversation started last week, I think Thursday, Dave, you and me, we talked. A number of other park districts in the community, in the state, had already passed similar motions, and it seemed to me, after visiting with you, that, and you, in fact, we got language from one of the park districts just to put in there, but it seemed to me that it was important that we have your back, and you have the best, you have our best interests behind your decision-making process. So. After we talked about it some more, it just seemed to me that it was appropriate that we go on record as saying you do have the discretion and we will back you up and you will do it in good faith, so on and so forth. So that's the rationale and the background for why we're at where we're at here, because at least at that stage, if you do something, we're supporting it ahead of time and we can always fix something, but in the times of things changing so rapidly, you just have to have the flexibility to, what I'm telling people at work is we're going 100 miles an hour playing whack-a-mole. And that's what the environment that we're in. So those are my comments. I'd like to open up for discussion to the rest of the commissioners.
So can you clarify, I've seen this written 2 different ways, and on the agenda it says, in regards to personal AL absences, and one other place I saw it in regards to personnel EL absences.
Yeah, I think when we wrote this motion, as President ROSTAD said, we did take it off verbiage from another park district, and I guess for clarification, to me, I think personnel absences is the correct terminology.
I would agree.
Yeah, because
Good catch.
personal sounds more like you as opposed to the people that you manage.
Good catch, Vicki.
Okay, and then my question is, what does this allow Dave to do that he can't do right now?
I think, I'd like to address that. I think that this gives Dave latitude to make decisions that may fall outside the normal scope of policy within the park district when handling personnel issues in a time of complete uncertainty and almost crisis within what's happening. And I think for me it's important that he knows that we trust him to make the right decisions for the park district, to take care of his staff so that his staff can take care of the park district facilities and properties that best serve our citizens. And I think that instead of coming back over and over again, we need to give him some latitude and we need to trust him. He does, I believe he does have the best interest in heart, and he will do what's right. And I think we just have to give him the latitude and let him know that we trust him and we support him in this time.
So this is just saying that we are letting him do the same things he was doing before, but basically hey, we support you, even though we already did?
Well, he may have to make decisions that fall outside normal protocol and policy on a quick turnaround.
You guys have an example of that?
Yeah, I guess, Commissioner Dawson, in our sick leave policy 240, it really doesn't give any latitude to grant, and I think between the directors in HR and Diane Jones, who's in the meeting right now, it doesn't give any latitude to grant emergency leave. And there's so many different scenarios that could come to fruition. I'm guessing some of them will. But right now, as we mentioned last Thursday, is that, we've met with all of our staff. We feel we can accommodate between working in home and shift or different shifts available for employees. All of our employees can, fulfill the better part of a day, but we just feel that there's going to be things coming down the line that we may need to be nimble on and adjust as we go. And I think, as Commissioner Grigg said, is we would just like that latitude to be able to adjust things. We're going to work between the directors group, we're going to work between Diane Jones and our HR department, and we're going to do what's best for the employees and the Park District as a whole.
But, and this is where I'm confused. I never felt that we weren't supporting you, and I never felt that we weren't giving you the latitude, and so I just didn't know if there was something specific that you guys had in mind that you expect to come up.
Yeah, I guess if, we do have some type of an emergency leave situation, there's nowhere in our policy manual that addresses that. So this would be kind of amending the sick leave policy.
Okay. So I'm guessing you guys have worked on some of this, and I don't know if this is the time to ask these questions, but I'm just curious, what's our plan if we're ordered to close?
Well, I think something like that would be, if we're ordered by close by federal, state, I think that word would come down from above. And if we were to close down, we'd probably want to have another special park board meeting and address that at that time. This is going to address the individual cases, which could be different for each employee.
Yeah, and I was, not just from an employee standpoint, but I was thinking from a Park District standpoint, do we know what that looks like if we're forced to close the doors, and what people need to make sure boilers are still running, and what that actually looks like for us?
Essential versus non-essential staff coming in, is that?
Well, and I don't like using that word because, I have manufacturers who are considered essential because they make parts for the healthcare industry. So I'm just curious if we have a plan of, okay, these are the four people that we need from operations who can make sure that the heat's still on in the buildings, and I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I'm just wondering if we have a plan that if we have to send everybody home, what that's going to look like.
Well, and my guess would be is they've been busting their ears getting to this point, assessing staff, where they're at, what they can do, how they're going to accommodate them. That could be next steps, is to start looking at the, there's so many what ifs, and the environment keeps changing so quickly, but we certainly could look at a worst case scenario and we're all sheltered in place, and if that's the case, then we're going to all be sheltered in place. So I know in my day job, I keep referring to my day job as reference, but we're still trying to figure out what we're doing now with the rules of the road that we're dealing with today. We haven't had any time to do any contingency planning for the next worst case scenarios to hit.
Yeah, I understand. I was just wondering if we had an idea what that might look like, and what if the staff if that's something that we maybe already had, or where we were at with that.
So our next step as staff, we're going to probably meet, I think, Wednesday after the facility meeting to talk about these different facilities. Not only to talk about where staff can go after they get, their own homework done, so to speak, with their own facilities, to branch out with us helping out at the Coliseum and Southwest and the sports arena. We're also going to talk about that specific a detail of who's going to take care of these facilities if we do end up closing. Because right now, we have people checking on those facilities currently that are already closed. But we'll have that discussion again on Wednesday to make sure that we've got the correct people checking those facilities.
One of the things that ties in exactly with what you're saying, Kevin, I know we're doing this again in my day job, is we're asking the question, what can we do to help, in this case, the city? What resources do we have if we need to offer up the Coliseum, Southwest, for, some kind of makeshift locations for people to stay? I'm just making stuff up off the top of my head, but we might want to start doing some inventorying of what we can do to offer the city and maybe even talk to the city and say, hey, you know, as you're planning going along, what are the needs that we might be able to help satisfy? It could be something as simple as staffing a call center, if they stand up a call center, or, you know, any of those kind of things, that we should be working with our partners to try and figure that out. I know there's a bunch of empty schools in town that, you know, if they want to put, you know, beds in and have places for people to convalesce or whatever, but
And we've done that in the past. In the 2009 flood, we basically took the direction from the city of Fargo and we sent staff to where they need be. So, yeah, that's all part of the emergency response process. I had a thought here and I can't remember what it was.
Thanks, Kevin.
Did you say Diane is in the room?
yes, she is.
So just a question that I have for her, and, you know, I understand we want to be flexible and nimble, and I don't think this is a matter of trusting or not trusting Dave and what's going on. And I would think, you know, we'll start with vacation leave, sick leave, consider flex time, consider working remote. But just wondering that, you know, you somewhat have a policy, but you want to be flexible. But then when it's all said and done, and I know every case is unique, when it's all said and done, that just so one person doesn't think that they weren't treated fairly. And I don't know if she has any concern, you know, as far as that goes, when we get everybody through it. And I guess I don't even want to think about that because we're trying to get through it as we go here. But just, you know, when it's all said and done, that the fair question doesn't come up, or someone might think that they were discriminated against because someone got some type of leave that they didn't. And I don't know if she has any thoughts on that at all.
Well, I think in a perfect world, everybody would think that they were treated fairly all the time because we do the best we can, but every situation is different and nobody is going to know the exact details of anybody else's situation. So we will treat the employees as absolutely fairly and correctly as we can, but each situation is going to be different. And whether or not you think that I treated Jerry fairly, but I didn't treat Joe fairly would be more of a personal perception. So we're using the guidelines of the Family First Act as a first step. We're using our policy 220 of sick and vacation leave as a next step. And on the rare occasion that we may need to work with an individual who's doing everything they can, but doesn't have any more time, didn't accrue the time, just started, was within their first 30 days, are we going to ask that employee to go 10 days without pay because they had the unfortunate circumstance of starting a new job right before a pandemic started? I don't know. Is it fair to that employee to make them take that time off without pay, or is it not fair? It depends on where you stand on that argument, I guess. But I think that we're going to do everything we can to make sure that employees are treated as fairly as possible. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and like I say, I don't think there is an answer. It's just a thought right now. And I think we're pretty well covered by what you're telling us. I think we're sitting in pretty good shape. And this is really just a 3-week scenario because we'll review it again at the next board meeting on the 14th.
Yeah, and Commissioner Popchak, I just, you know, we're kind of following what other districts have done, what other local agencies have done. I think, you know, there's a scenario out there, as Diane explained, that, you know, if we have a new employee or an employee that the sick leave is down to a minimum, those are the cases we need to treat individually, because, you know, to have somebody lose all their vacation or lose all their sick leave due to this coronavirus pandemic, we feel that we don't want them to be in the hole for the next 6 months or a year and a half. And we want to be able to, you know, step in when we need to and make sure we create a fair situation for everybody. Now, can somebody argue, you know, fairness? Of course they can. But we just want to try to do what's right for all of our employees. They're very valuable to the Park District. We've spent a lot of time. We want to take care of them and their families and also take care of the Park District.
When you said a 3-week ordeal, Rusty, I put my fingers crossed because I thought you were talking about a 3-week and then this will be over.
Yeah, it was like,
It'll be over before that, Jerry.
I was like, what does Rusty know? We don't know. And
Yeah,
I did. I
exactly.
perked up. I was like, 3 weeks? Sweet.
No, we can do that. All right.
Diane, do you guys have an idea or something that shows where we're at with employees who have leave versus don't, and kind of a spreadsheet that, I mean, how many employees if, and I'm not saying we're doing this one way or the other, but if we had to close the doors tomorrow and people couldn't come to work, and we chose to tell them they had to use vacation or sick leave, how many employees would be impacted by that within the first week?
I haven't run those reports yet, but we would have them available through our Paylocity system.
You know, and I'm not saying that's what we do, but I think it's good information to know, you know, if this lasts for a very long time, and let's just say we say, okay, we're gonna pay the first 10 days, but then you have to start using your own leave, how many employees can sustain that for a long term?
Well-
Versus how many, I think it'd just be good to have an idea what we'd be facing and how many of our staff would be facing a hardship. I think that's good information to have.
But what I think when you say, how many employees would that impact? Actually, it's going to impact every employee, and whether they have the resources to be able to, you know, take 6 weeks of vacation off or something like this or not, it does impact every employee. And the longevity employees that have worked here longer, of course, they have the resources in their bank, but it's still something that this is a worldwide pandemic, and it affects everybody. And you know, if the government shuts...
I understand that. What I'm, obviously everybody's impacted, but what I'm saying is, you know, what's our status with employees who, let's say we close and we decide to pay everybody for a week, or pick whatever arbitrary number you want, and then we say, okay, now you have to start using our leave. How many employees would struggle because they don't have that leave? And when I say are impacted by it, would not be getting paid or something like that. That's more what I'm looking for. I mean, we have a lot of long-term staff who could go for a long time using some of their paid time off and it wouldn't impact them. But there are others who very quickly would be finding themselves with no leave. And so it would take them, like you said, a long time to recover, to build up some sick leave.
Well, to me, that doesn't...
All I'm saying is I think it's good to have some knowledge about what impact this could have on our staff, whether we pay them or don't pay them, or how much we pay them. I'm not asking anybody to come up with a decision today. I'm just saying I think it's important that we know where we're at.
We have access to that information, we've just not run those reports right now.
Yeah, and frankly, I don't know if that paints the full-on picture, because, you know, I could have very little leave available to me, but I've been frugal over the years, and I got, you know, besides the stock market taking a dip, I have plenty of money set aside. I can live for a long time without feeling a pinch. Someone else may have more leave built up, but they don't have the money in the bank. You know, that's going to be a different effect. So, you know, you're taking a slice of a whole. I'm not sure if we can evaluate it from how much budget it would cost us to take care of all the staff for 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever. But I don't know if we can use that as a tool or a barometer to evaluate whether, you know, Joe Deutsch is going to be financially okay, or I'm going to be, or Leaker is going to be financially okay. I'm not sure we can do that based on that number.
I think,
I understand that.
But I don't even think you're asking personally financially. I think you're just asking for where we are with leave balance.
yeah, I think what I'm hearing people saying is that we're just, that
Run those reports and
they just want to see what kind of sick leave people have and what kind, I mean, just information. It doesn't even necessarily have to be used in order to, I'm just hearing that if we're going to end up having that conversation someday, if the statistics or whatever, if the information that can be in people's hands ahead of time, then it'll be easier to decide if it's going to be used or not, if that makes sense.
That information can be made available
Okay.
if the commissioners want it.
Again, it doesn't have to be used to weigh in, but it just wants to be in.
Gotcha.
people's hands in case they want to. I mean, you know, it's good to know.
All right, we need either a motion or further discussion, or I guess a lack of motion would be the third option.
I haven't said anything, and so I'll just weigh in. I mean, I know we discussed at the last meeting that, you know, that we said to Dave, you're gonna use your discretion and make these decisions, and go ahead. And now we're here potentially making a motion to do the exact same thing. And, you know, my first question or my first thought was the same thing. Well, why are we getting together to make a motion on this thing if we've already said go ahead and do that? But then the more I thought about it, and, you know, Dave's trying to run this park district under these circumstances, and I can't imagine, because everybody's looking to you for direction and whatever else. And, you know, we recently hired Dave to do the job, and I fully support him in his decision-making and his ability to do the job, and I want him to have a clear mind that whatever decisions he's making are 100% supported and will never be questioned. Therefore, I support this, going forward with this motion, for the sake of just giving him discretion to make decisions, and knowing that we're supporting him in making those decisions on the fly in the moment. Anybody else have any?
Anybody else?
All right. If nobody else has anything further, or they can do that in the discussion if they want, I will move to I'll move to allow the executive director to use his discretion in regards to personnel with an E, absences related to COVID-19 event, the COVID-19 event. The motion, oh yeah, does it need to say that the motion will, doesn't need to say when the motion will expire? Or do we see it? The motion will expire at the next regularly scheduled board meeting unless reauthorized at that time.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Since we've got a couple of remote people, Rusty, I'll start with you, and then we'll go down to Vicki and Stacy.
I'm good.
Okay, Vicki?
Yes.
Stacy, anything?
Aye. Nope.
Oh, we're not voting yet. We're just, any further?
We're not voting.
I just didn't want you stumbling all each over you, so I thought I'd call a roll a little bit. In here, Joel, yeah,
I'm-
okay. Jeff, pull the board.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Papacek,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted.
Yes, the motion passes. Any further business?
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
I'm just wondering if you guys have been working on, you know, what you're gonna do if somebody tests positive who works for us. What you're gonna do if somebody in our staff is exposed and we're gonna want them to not come to work. Just wondering if you have an idea what that might look like, or if you're putting something together, so God forbid we have to, but we're prepared.
I'm looking at Dave and
I-
Diane. I'm going,
yeah.
which one of you has this?
Yeah, I think if somebody tested positive, or if somebody was in contact with somebody that tested positive, our recommendations would be that they quarantine for, the next 14 days. If they have symptoms or whatever, they check with their local provider. And as they're cleared to come back, then they would come back after that 14 days.
And isn't there something in that act that
Yeah.
talks about compensating them during those 14 days if they were?
Yes,
Right.
the Family First does say that if someone is sick, that they receive emergency sick leave and they receive 100% compensation. If they are at home because a family member is sick and they need to take care of that family member, and/or they've been exposed and they need to stay home, or for childcare issues, that's when the 10 days and then the 2/3 pay things sets in. Because
Okay,
that's
so,
emergency sick leave.
I couldn't quite hear you, Diane, but, I'm under the understanding that the Families First Act is effective April 3rd. Are we using that, or are we going above that on our own as the park district?
Well, we really don't have any cases to, I mean, you haven't dealt
I
with it.
understand that, but.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of why we wanted this discretion with the emergency leave. If something should happen and come up with this type of scenario, whether it's, you know, a positive test or taking care of a family member, that we can deal with that internally and
Well, I'm just asking if we have a plan and if you guys are working, you know, just because I think being prepared is important rather than just winging it as we go. And it helps me if I feel like you got this.
yeah, and we're currently working on some guidelines related to new employees that are coming in from outside the area, working on some guidelines on employees that may have traveled and then also our meetings. So it's a work in progress, and we meet on this daily.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And if you just keep us in the loop, I appreciate the emails that you're sending to everybody so that we kind of see what the message is for the staff. And then I had one other suggestion. I really appreciated the social networking videos for keeping your kids entertained, and the now Courts Plus people putting on workouts for working out from home. And today I was thinking we should consider, and I'm not making a directive, but I think it'd be nice for our public to see our directors talking about their particular department and how things are being handled, and kind of putting a message out from the park district that we're still here and we want you to recreate, but we want you to do it safely. And so that's just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Kevin would look good on a video.
Oh, I think they all would. Yep.
Now, we just did some Microsoft team networking this afternoon to see if it would work, and you'd be surprised on what people look like with close-up cameras, so.
How did that go, by the way, technology?
Worked pretty good. I think it works for staff that are all part of, you know, SharePoint and have our
Right.
software. One thing we got to look at is how do we bring in the media to a meeting like this, so, without having them to show up in person.
We can get some phone lines.
Kevin can like take us on a tour with his phone of the recreation department. Here's laptop Clunt, currently sitting at his station doing his work. Hey, Dave, and you know he can show his.
I was thinking more on the lines of, you know, Pete showing us the new lawnmower that we're getting. So as soon as the grass shows up, we'll be ready to mow it.
Now, I was sure you were going to go down a golf course line there,
Well,
Stacy.
I'm always thinking golf, but I didn't want to be selfish.
We'll work with Stephanie in our events department. She usually has some pretty good ideas, so.
And just to let the board know, we are ordering some microphones that we are intending to use at the board meeting that would help reach out to the media and other public members that would like to know what's going on at our meetings.
Good, good.
Carolyn, are the guys up north at Edgewood still going fast and furious getting their restaurant ready?
Yes, Keith has been in there regularly. We have floors being cleaned, we have refrigeration equipment being cleaned, we have equipment that's being ordered. Midco was there talking about putting in TVs, so yes, they are working hard to get it ready to go when we are ready to open.
People are going to be very hungry by the time they open.
They're even working on some delivery, whether it's to the 18th hole or it's, you know, somewhere else in the neighborhood.
So I did have one other question. I was wondering, what level does the river get to when we start doing stuff, for a lack of other word? I mean, I know we do preparation ahead of time, but what's our, okay, we got to start doing some serious stuff. What's the level?
Kind of the two elevations we look at right now are 28 feet to 30 feet up at Edgewood. If the flood is going to be around 26, 27, we'll probably want to get some sandbags to protect the bowl area at Edgewood. If the flood is predicted to go to, 32 or higher, we probably won't use the manpower to construct that levee. And then our next critical point is 34 feet at El Zagal. As with last year, the river came up to about 34.6, so it had about 6 inches of water on our sandbags. And we can protect that one an additional 2 feet to 36. That one's probably not as critical as Edgewood. We've got a new lift system, a new drainage system at El Zagal, so if that were to flood, typically the water does not get on that golf course until 34, 35 feet. And as a river, if it goes up to 38 and then drops back down to 34, we can pump that out within a day or two, which doesn't mean there's not a lot of silt buildup or anything. It's a matter of just maybe breaking up the dusty silt, and then the grass will start growing again. So that might be one if we have issues with gatherings and sandbagging that, we might say, hey, we could forego El Zagle. It all kind of depends on the environment the next couple of weeks. Edgewood is a little more critical. If we can keep it out of there at 28 to 30, then that's a big deal for us, for cleanup and everything.
Gotcha. Well, there's gonna be a lot of out of shape, overweight people who have been sitting around that are probably gonna be more than happy to sling sandbags for us.
Yep. And then, of course, all of our river properties like Lindenwood, some of the river trails, Dyke East, those you really don't do anything to try to protect. It's just a matter of cleaning up after the event.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Meeting adjourned.